When a man finds himself alone, he inherits a strange kind of wealth, time. Time that no longer breaks into hours or minutes, but flows as one unbroken river in which he begins to recognize himself. For many, solitude is a burden, a shadow that settles on the heart and makes it heavy. But for the one who can look upon life through the lens of wisdom, solitude becomes a teacher, stern, yet fair. The Stoics understood that the greatest trials are not brought by enemies, poverty, or loss, but by the ceaseless voice within. Marcus Aurelius wrote that men seek quiet retreats, in the country, by the sea, in the mountains, yet forget that the truest retreat lies within their own soul. Solitude tests whether one can enter this inner sanctuary without fear, face one's own thoughts, and emerge not in despair, but in strength. The longer a man is alone, the more illusions fall away. Gone are the idle conversations, the casual promises, the noise of constant distraction. In their place comes clarity. Clarity about what matters, what does not, what belongs to you, and what is foreign. Yet this clarity is not freely given. In the beginning, solitude feels cold, empty. It strips away the familiar warmth of others. It forces a man to listen to the noise within. Thoughts once drowned out by chatter, obligations, and diversions. Seneca observed that the wise man is self-sufficient, but does not reject friends. He lives so as not to need them, yet values them when they are present. Likewise, in solitude, a man learns to stand on his own. He no longer seeks someone to lift him in hardship. He becomes the one capable of withstanding the storm. But solitude is not only a forge of strength, it is also a test of the heart. In silence, a man remembers what he has done and what he has left undone. His mistakes, regrets, and weaknesses stand before him. Among the crowd, one can forget them. Alone, they grow louder. Here, the choice is made. Some surrender, letting the soul grow dim. Others accept the challenge and become purer. The longer a man walks alone, the more he understands that few things are truly necessary: food, shelter, a clear conscience, a sound mind. All else is decoration, which can be lost without losing oneself. Epictetus taught, "Seek no happiness in what lies beyond your control. Look for it in what is yours to govern." In solitude, this truth reveals itself sharply. Yet solitude carries its own shadow. The longer a man lives solely for himself, the harder it becomes to return to others. He begins to prize peace so highly that every meeting feels like an intrusion. He grows cautious to the point of coldness. His words become rare, his gestures sparing. Independence deepens, but so does detachment. The Stoics warned against this. Seneca wrote, "There is no virtue in avoiding people. Virtue lies in remaining yourself while among them." Solitude must be a place of rest, not a fortress into which you flee from the world. In isolation, a man learns the value of time. He stops wasting it on the trivial. He watches as days fold into months, months into years, and understands that life slips away like water through open fingers. He learns to guard each moment, knowing no one will give it back. With time, he also learns patience. Without the crowd's rush, without demands imposed by others, he begins to live in the rhythm of nature. He sees that much ripens slowly, and that haste bears no fruit. Solitude teaches him to listen, not only to words, but to silence, to the wind's murmur, to the crackle of a fire, to the beat of his own heart. And in this listening, he discovers that the world speaks even when it says nothing. Yet the Stoic knows that wisdom gained in silence must be tested amid noise. Just as a blade forged in fire must meet the trial of battle, so must the character formed in solitude be proven among others. A man too long apart risks losing the ability to feel compassion, for he forgets the shared joy and shared pain of human company. Marcus Aurelius reminded us, man was made for action, for fellowship, for service. To live only for oneself is to betray one's nature. The Stoic therefore withdraws not to escape the world, but to return to it better equipped. The longer a man remains alone, the more he comes to know himself. He sees his strengths and his flaws, his passions and his fears. He learns to rule over them, for there is no one else to bear that duty. Yet he must remember, self-knowledge is not the end. The true aim is to use it to live rightly. Solitude is a trial of maturity. It reveals whether you can be honest with yourself, whether you can live without constant approval, whether you can guard your principles when no one is there to support them. Seneca said, "Be a friend to yourself, and you will never be alone." Perhaps this is the greatest prize of solitude, the ability to be one's own companion and comforter. But this road should lead toward others, not away from them. If you have grown strong in solitude, your strength should be a light, not a wall, a warmth to share, not a fortress to hide within. The longer you remain alone, the more clearly you see that true freedom lies not in severing all bonds, but in standing among others without losing yourself. Then solitude ceases to be exile. It becomes your workshop, the place you return to again and again to shape your character before stepping once more into the world. And in that workshop, there is no fear, only the calm knowledge that all you need for a worthy life is already within you. Solitude is not friend or foe. It is a mirror. In it, you see what has always been there, though you did not notice. If you look honestly, you emerge stronger. But if you gaze only at yourself, forgetting others, you may lose the ability to see the world at all. Remember, wisdom born in silence must endure the test of sound. Virtue is not a statue standing in a desert, but a lamp burning in a house where people gather. And so, even if tomorrow you find yourself alone once more, you will know that solitude is not an end, but a path, one of many along which the soul travels toward its true freedom. Solitude, for all its stillness, is not a stagnant pond. It is a flowing river. At first, its waters run cold, unsettling to the one who steps in. But as the days turn into weeks and the weeks into months, the man standing in this current begins to feel its rhythm. He learns where the currents are strong, where the waters are calm, where the depths lie hidden beneath an apparently placid surface. In this way, solitude reveals its first great secret, that the man who remains alone long enough begins to see time differently. No longer does he count the hours by the clock or the days by the calendar. Instead, he senses the passing of life through the cycle of light and dark, the waning of the moon, the slow turn of the seasons. He sees the subtle change of the air in the morning, the shifting shadows in the late afternoon. In this slower perception, he begins to understand something the ancients knew well, that to live is not to hurry. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Time is like a river made up of the events which happen, and a violent stream. For as soon as a thing has been seen, it is carried away, and another comes in its place, and this will be carried away too." Alone, a man learns not only to see this truth, but to feel it. In the company of others, the stream is often hidden by the noise. In solitude, one hears its every ripple. The longer he remains alone, the more he finds that the outer world and the inner world begin to mirror each other. A clear morning, after a night of storm, feels like the lifting of a heavy thought. A sudden wind sweeping across a hillside feels like a burst of courage. The silent falling of snow reminds him of the quiet fading of certain desires. In solitude, nature is no longer background. It becomes companion, teacher, and at times, the only voice that speaks. Epictetus advised, "Seek not the good in external things, seek it in yourselves." Yet he also understood that the self is shaped by what it contemplates. A man alone for a long time begins to contemplate the vastness around him. He sees the stars as no longer far-off decorations, but as signs of a greater order in which his own life is but one point of light. This perspective strips away vanity. No man can look at the night sky in silence and still think himself the center of the world. Yet solitude is no constant sweetness. There are days when it feels like an empty road stretching endlessly ahead without a single figure approaching. There are mornings when the silence seems heavy, pressing upon the chest, when the absence of another voice feels like the absence of air itself. The Stoic accepts these moments without flinching. He does not seek to drown them in distraction. He lets the weight press upon him until he understands its shape, until it no longer frightens him. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." In solitude, a man learns whether this is true for him. He sees how much of his discomfort comes not from the silence itself, but from the mind's endless weaving of fears. Fears of being forgotten, of becoming strange to others, of losing the ability to return. When he faces these thoughts directly, many dissolve like mist in sunlight. The longer he remains alone, the more he discovers the depth of his own self-reliance. He no longer waits for others to bring him meaning. He builds it himself. If a day feels empty, he fills it. If a task is to be done, he does it without audience or praise. Here, the Stoic teaching becomes flesh, that the good life is lived according to one's principles, regardless of who sees. Yet there is a danger in prolonged solitude, a subtle one. The man who grows too accustomed to his own company may begin to forget the language of others. His thoughts may become like a closed garden, tended only by himself, beautiful yet unknown to the outside world. The Stoics would warn against this. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, "What brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee." A man is not a complete being if he serves only himself. Thus, the wise man uses solitude not as a permanent dwelling, but as a retreat, a place to sharpen the blade of his mind and spirit before returning to the shared labor of life. He learns to enter it without fear and to leave it without regret. In the long stillness of being alone, one also learns the art of simplicity. There is no one to impress, no one to envy, no one to compete with. The garments you wear, the food you eat, the space you inhabit, all become only what is necessary. And in that stripping away, the mind feels lighter, for every unnecessary possession is a quiet burden, every needless desire a chain. Epictetus said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." Solitude gives a man the chance to live this truth not as an idea, but as a daily reality. He finds that he can live well with little, and that to live well requires far less than the crowd believes. As the years pass, for in some cases, solitude is not a passing season, but a lasting way of life, the man becomes like an old tree on a quiet plain. His roots run deep into the soil of his own values. The storms may bend him, but they cannot break him, and yet he remains aware that even a tree stands within a forest, even if the others are far apart. The ultimate gift of long solitude is clarity, not the cold clarity of a stone, but the warm clarity of a calm sea after a storm. A man sees himself, the world, and the fleeting nature of all things. He learns not to cling too tightly to anything, for all will pass, joy and sorrow, gain and loss, company and solitude itself. And so, when the day comes that he walks again among others, he carries with him a stillness they can feel. His words are measured, his eyes steady, his steps unhurried. He no longer needs to fill every silence. He understands that silence is as much a part of speech as sound. Those around him sense something different, not aloofness, but depth, as if he is listening to more than just the conversation, as if he is aware of the river of time flowing beneath it all. In this way, the man who has been alone for long grows both less dependent and more capable of true connection. For he no longer approaches others from a place of need, but from a place of choice. He can give freely because he is not trying to take. This is why the longer a man remains alone, the more he becomes both unshakable and gentle. The storms of life may strike him, but they find no panic within. The pleasures of life may tempt him, but they do not rule him. He has become a friend to himself, and in becoming so, he becomes a better friend to others. As Seneca taught, he who is contented is rich. Long solitude teaches contentment, not the contentment of resignation, but the contentment of mastery over one's desires, one's fears, and one's restless need for constant company. And so, the Stoic path through solitude is not one of withdrawal for its own sake, but of transformation. To remain alone is not to escape the world, but to learn how to stand firmly within it. The man who has walked this path does not fear being alone, nor does he fear the crowd. He can walk both roads, for he carries his true dwelling within himself,